12, and honest to God, I was just lazy and never changed it after that. We are the first Republican rather, to actually get elected into a city council district that is 2.6 to 1, Democrat to Republican for the first time since 1976. And we ran on a libertarian platform. We ran on a platform of lower taxes, private property rights. Your home is your property, and what you do with it is your business. And number 3, everyone here, of course, if you're from the Triple Cities, you know the whole IBM story, right? They left in the 60s, they switched from hardware to software, they left the area, and ever since then it's really kind of been like a job brain drain, if you will, in terms of the job losses. And unfortunately, to some extent, things have never been the same, right? I always tell constituents that my main job as their local legislative representative is to essentially cut through the red tape. My job is to advocate for them and them as the constituents that I represent, right? I am not a councilman. I am their councilman, right? We've kind of lost the idea that elected officials are public servants, right? We represent the interests of the people, even when those interests go against, quite frankly, what we may personally believe, right? So, number 1, a very partisan and polarized environment, right? Ideology in the United States is kind of like culture. It's a big pendulum, and it swings from the left to the right, right? So think of the ideological spectrum and what we've seen over the last 10 years. We went from George W. Bush to Barack Obama to now Donald Trump, right? And who knows what in the world is going to come next year, right? I thought 2016 might be the most interesting election, and maybe I would be wrong, right? So we'll see what happens. But the idea that the Constitution of the United States sets clear and explicit parameters to what government does or should do and should not do are presently clear. Government in the United States is cut vertically and horizontally. We know that through separation of powers and checks and balances. Different branches, legislative, executive, judicial, and cut horizontally, national, state, and local. The founders of this country overwhelmingly believed, that the power of the individual lies at the lowest level of government. Plain and simple. Now, that does not mean explicitly or implicitly that government at the lowest level should be expanded through the roof. Believe me, there are some people that advocate for that, right? But it's incredibly important to understand the power of the fact that the lowest level of government is the one that touches you the most. And we often tend to forget that. Anybody by a show of hands know which election impacts you the highest, but has the lowest level turnout? And the answer, believe it or not, is actually not election day in odd-numbered years. Anybody know? Especially in New York. Yes. School board? School board elections. Yes. Lowest level turnout, right? How many people here either own a home or live with people that own a home and heard a complaint about property taxes within the last 50 million in 7 years, right? All of us, right? Think of if you live with family, right, and you have parents or guardians or whatever that pay property taxes, ask them to actually give you a breakdown between their municipal, their Broome County, if you're in Broome, or Tioga, wherever it might be, and their school taxes. Think about that for a moment, right? those school taxes incredibly drive the cost of living, particularly in a state like New York, right? Even in the upstate New York. Oftentimes downstate tends to get that stereotype, but not always the case, right? So, the idea that we can run at the local level and represent at the local level in a minimalistic sense is not only good theoretically and ideologically, but it is best in reality, right? We ran on a platform of three basic things. Number one, out of all upstate cities in New York State, Binghamton, New York has the highest per capita property taxes in comparison or in relation to home property values. That's number one. Number two, what are the services, and more specifically, what are the quality of services that we get for that comparative and proportional level of taxation? And number three, we've all heard this: jobs, jobs, jobs. How do we get them here? Well, over the last 5 to 10 years, in the city of Binghamton at least, here's been the answer. How many people here know what a pilot is? P-I-L-O-T. What is it?
Taxes in lieu of.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what's something called a payment in lieu of taxes. If you live anywhere in the city limits and you live in student housing, there is a very high possibility that the brick and mortar building that you live in actually has some sort of a pilot agreement. So here's the Cliff Notes version of it, right? A developer comes to the city of Binghamton and says, I want to take structure X and turn it into structure Y, whatever that is. So we deal with zoning factors, we deal with property factors, utilities, and so on and so on and so forth, right? They say the costs to do X to Y are going to be Z dollars, and in order for us to be profitable at some rate, we need the city to not inherently lower our tax assessment, but give us a remediation on that tax assessment for, say, 10 or 15 or 20, maybe even potentially more years, right? But we libertarian-minded people know that, except for those crazy people that work at the thing called the Federal Reserve, money doesn't grow on trees, even though they like to print billions of it every month, right? If you have a property that comes into play and they're not paying their full tax assessable value, what happens to that leftover money? Think about it. Where does it come from?
Remaining tax base.
Say it again.
It comes from the remaining tax base.
Remaining tax base. Those allocations and that leftover money gets shifted over to your remaining tax base. And guess what? If you don't have a lot of homeowners, that entraps you even more and more and more and more, right? So number one, I think it's important to understand that, if I may, John, forgive me, this document may be one of the greatest things ever written by human beings, is most definitely applicable to the lower level of government, right? Number two, I'll skip actually, I'll kind of extend, right? People running for office, right? How many people here by a show of hands want to run for office in some? See, that's awesome, that's great. For those of you who don't have your hands up, by definition, you're smarter than I am, right? That's great that if you want to run for office. So, let me give you a quick rundown and Cliff Note version of how that works here in New York, even though we've had a number of changes that have been voted on and put into place here, right? Not from an ideological perspective, but we've seen quite a bit of liberalization in election law here in New York over the last couple of months, which, by the way, in principle, is not inherently a bad thing, right? I will say that my party, particularly on the national level, does not do a good job, in all honesty, does a horrible job, of actually attempting to actually accept those things. We like to say that we're Ronald Reagan Republicans with a big tent that everyone can fit in. But the reality of it is we do a bad job of painting out of that stereotype. And unfortunately, in some ways, that stereotype is true, right? So, if you want to run for office, the first thing you have to do is you have to figure out what level it is and when it is, right? Primaries, or rather, forgive me, state and local primaries used to be in September. They are now in June, right? So the petition period that used to be in June and July now overlaps, well, at least this year, it was the last week of February going through March, and then up until April 4th, right? Number 2, this is going to sound really, really corny. Go on Google and go to the New York State Department of Division and Licensure. You need to get your notary stamp, because that helps you when you're getting petitions, right? The next one, get involved in a local, hopefully libertarian, political party, right? Get involved. Work on someone's campaign and learn from them through their successes and their faults. We need to understand that losing is a good thing. It's a frame of reference, right? I worked on lots of campaigns, from state senate all the way down to village dog catcher and everything in between, right? For different candidates that I thought, yes, I could support that person. I think they would do a good job, right? You need to get out there, right? In the major two-party system that we have today, we're getting a lot of back and forth with this, a lot of polarization, right? That question that Larry asked earlier was a really good one, right? How many people here watch TV, right? We get so bombarded, right? And unfortunately, we end up in a political system where, to cut through the noise and to try to get your voice heard, for better or for worse, ends up unfortunately being something outside the norm, right? But you would be surprised, by knocking on doors and actually talking to people and listening to them, what their issues are and how you can best go about fixing it. People want to know, I can tell you this from firsthand experience, they want to know at the end of the day that their voices are heard and that you will take them into consideration. I will tell you this up front from working in different elections for years. Don't lie. Don't do it. People will respect you more, even if they disagree with you, knowing that they will get the full you every time. I can't even begin to tell you how important that is. It's those one-on-one moments that literally change everything. They can change everything on the dime of a hat, right? So what are some of the things that at least I've attempted to do and work for on the, oh my goodness, I can't believe 3.5 years now, right? Running for re-election this year, actually, on the city council. Number 1, we've passed 3 consecutive budgets with both residential and commercial property tax decreases. When we did that 3 years ago, it was the first time since 1998 that we did that with both tax rates, right? Our municipality in the city of Binghamton is both homestead and non-homestead. We have both, right? And that's a whole New York State tax system that started back in the 70s. That's a whole thing, right? Number 2, I have supported pieces of local ordinance legislation, particularly during the budget process, that have steered back, in my opinion, what are simply other forms of taxation. Fees. That's usually the big one. That's where New York gets you a lot, right? I saw a meme on Facebook the other day, and it was something like, I'm driving in a car that you tax me on, being paid for by an income that you tax me on, driving on roads that you finance through taxes, and there's a pothole. Please fix it. Thank you, everyone. Something like that. right? But it kind of shows that rollover over and over and over again, right? Number 3, locally jobs, right? We have, unfortunately, had a number of pilot agreements, tax agreements, the ones that we were talking about earlier, come before. I am proud to say that I am the only person on the Binghamton City Council who literally has a 100% record of not fighting publicly against those agreements, but voting no against every single one. Plain and simple. I told people when I ran in 2015 I would never, ever once support a piece of legislation that moves the tax burden from someone else to you. We'll never do that. Plain and simple. Right? Last thing, as it relates to jobs, one main stretch, if you know the part of the city that's the city of Binghamton that's referred to as the First Ward, Clinton Street is a big R2 designation in terms of zoning for commercial and industrial space. We've had, you ready for this, 6 new small businesses that have opened up within the last 3.5 years. Not one of them a tax code, not one. Come in, local jobs, working with them through the entire planning and zoning process, taking each step. And by the way, as well, even though working with the Economic Development Office, not using 1 cent of economic development dollars, and working with them. People want to invest if they see that there is a profit that can be made, which in a free market is what firms and individuals do, right? That's a part of what we do. It's not an inherent bad thing, right? Profit does not directly correlate to greed, right? Although in extremes it can, right? And have all those new businesses open, right? Is it a slow process? Well, Lord knows it is, right? We are not going to bring the city of Binghamton back to the grandeur of the 1920s overnight. But the truth is that we take it 1 step at a time, right? And we put those limited government ideas to work on a local level, and it comes to fruition, all right? So I really thank all of you for the opportunity to be here with me and invite me, obviously, forgive me, and be happy to obviously take any questions or comments or answers that. Please.
I really like what you had to say about government. The lowest level that you get to is where you can have impact.
Yeah.
And my message to the young people here, and a lot of people raise their hand about running for office, the way you can get involved early on is get on your local zoning board or your planning board. Those are a good way to see how government works.
Yes.
And you don't have to run, you don't have, right now for libertarians, you don't have to petition, but if you don't have to petition, you just get involved and see what happens.
Yep.
I'm on my local zoning board, and my goal there is to help people do what they want to do with their own stuff,
Yep.
with their own property. But that's a way to get involved and start to see from the ground level how it all works.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That was very kind of you.
By the way, I'm Debbie Rosenbeck, and I'm here with Jim Rosenbeck, who's your next speaker.
Excellent. Thank you both. And Debbie, thank you for that. I actually should have thought of that. That is an excellent idea to really kind of, you know, we often tend to forget that government by definition does not labor, right? It cannot labor. Government only reallocates, right? And it's one of the 3 of its primary funding revenue mechanisms is, of course, taxation, right? But through the inherent bureaucracy, there are a number of factors that come into play, like, for example, planning. In the city of Binghamton, we've got the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals, right? And there are a number of committees. And we often tend to forget, and Debbie just made an excellent point there, that's a great reminder, that it's not even just even in local elected office, right? It might be through even volunteering with organizations like the League of Women Voters of Broome and Tioga County, right? Getting out there and talking to people, gauging them. People want to be heard, they want to be listened to. We we've gotten so out of touch in our politics, right? And I think this actually presents an incredible opportunity for libertarians and libertarian like-minded people, right? It presents us an opportunity to be able to get in there and actually say, there are people that believe that when you live your life, whether it's speech all the way down to what road I'm driving on, you know, right outside Binghamton University, there are people that inherently believe that there is a level of equality between us and that we should be treated equally, right? And you should be allowed within the parameters of you not impacting the rights of someone else to live your life as you deem fit. Because you know what? Contrary to what most establishment Democrats and Republicans will tell you, we actually believe that you're smart enough to make that decision for yourself. Plain and simple, right? Debbie, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yes?
A couple of things to say.
Please.
When you, Gio had suggested that you attend meetings, there are dual purposes of that, is to become informed directly yourself in person about what's going on. It makes the people that you are observing accountable because there's a person or persons from the public there. Another option is if you don't want to do, and stay for the whole meeting, because sometimes the really hot stuff happens at the end of the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Under things called general discussion, or you know how things happen.
Oh, yeah.
And another way that you can learn about how municipal government works is to read minutes that are posted by municipalities. There are all different spectrums of thoroughness, or not thoroughness, that's the wrong word to do, but detail that go into minutes. But you can learn how local government, how it works. And you will learn a lot about either your own municipality or about, and compare to how other ones do. It may sound like a really dry reading, and
Sometimes it is.
it is, but you can also learn a lot about what's going on in the community, what individuals within the community think are important, and or to just go and observe something. I can't stress that too strongly. And you can get in, that's how you get involved. You say, well, why did that happen? So go to the next meeting and ask. Say, why did that happen? Why did you vote that way? Or why did you do anything about it?
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And I think that's a good point. Hold our feet to the fire.
Don't just go vote. I mean, voting is important, but there are other aspects of being involved in your community that are equally, are really important. The other thing I wanted to talk about was your pilot, the idea of a pilot. One of the effects of pilot agreements is that they push low and moderate income persons out of communities because of the tax implications. For instance, you'll have individuals who are specifically building or renovating certain types of structures, and it forces those people who used to be in that core out. And it forces them out into other surrounding jurisdictions or into rural areas where there are fewer services available. It's a very serious problem, because you want to have communities that are a mixture of all different types of people and income levels and backgrounds. But when you push those people out, what you have left are the people who can afford to do that. And it's I know you've probably talked about that at City Council at length, and you've observed that. The whole composition of your population in a municipality changes when you have a large number of pilots. So what you're doing at Clinton Street is taking the first ward and keeping it the first ward. And I, grew up in this area, and I know the rich history that is there. levels the playing field because you don't have the big pile person over here who's pushing everybody out. And if you keep doing that, you'll have the composition of the first ward will be very different than the Center City. It'll be more of a community.
Thank you for that.
Not to beat that to death, 2 points on pilots is,
Please.
if the local, we use Vestal as an example, if we say no, they will go to the county. The developers are as savvy as
Sure.
you are, or sometimes even more. So when a local municipality says no, they just climb the ladder and the county says yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes we are caught, between a rock and a
That
hard
is true.
place where
Yeah.
the municipalities like you, no, no, no. All right, you don't want it, I'll go to the county. The county says yes.
Yeah.
And the other issue is, Vestal might say no. Endicott has will welcome you with open arms and say, come on in.
And come and say, hey, come on over. Yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah. That's a good point.
Or the other avenue is a deviated pilot.
Correct.
So there's ways to.
No, there is. There is. In any season. That's a good point as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, Jim.
Oh, Gio, I have a question for
Please.
you. I know a little bit, you talked about yourself in academia, and recently I was on Bob Joseph, and he posed the question, why do you think academia is moving so rapidly? And I know a lot of us in this room are college students who are feeling that pressure.
Sure.
And whether it be being afraid because they're threatening to knock points, or, you're afraid to speak out because classmates might attack you, why do you think that's happening in academia? What do you think us as students can do about it?
It's a big problem in my profession. A lot of people who teach, in my opinion, hide behind the banner of academic freedom, and it's very problematic. I see a few familiar faces in here. I always try my best to do this. Sometimes I forget, but regardless of the class that I teach, whether it's an econ or a public policy or something like that, I always tell my students two things on the first day of class. Number one, I don't care what you think. I don't. What I do care is why you think it. All right. The second thing is that, in my opinion, for worse, the educational system overall, and this isn't even just higher ed, this is even, forgive me, K through 12. We unfortunately are in the position today where we don't teach students anymore. There are a lot of people out there that preach to students. I actually advocate for students to tell them, I might have rolled out of bed this morning on the wrong side and maybe having a really bad day. And I may say something stupid in a microeconomics class like, equilibrium price has nothing to do with supply and demand. Now, I'll never say something that stupid, but challenging them to say, if you think I said something wrong, call me out on it. I don't see myself as what I say is Bible. I see what I say as I am a shepherd, right? And it is my job to teach you every side of the coin, the theory, the quantitative aspects of it, if there are any there, right? And how it's applicable in the real world, right? But I have to trust that you, John, for example, have an intelligent brain, and as it comes to your own personal decisions, you're smart enough to make up your own mind. You don't need me preaching and feeding you my ideology. If you see that on a class, I will be honest with you, I've seen both answers to this question. I've seen people answer, suck it up, because maybe you're doing your bachelor's and you're going on for your MA or your master's or something after that. You gotta have that GPA and you gotta do what you gotta do, right? I think, unfortunately, it's very individualistic on a course basis. Some faculty members are more liberal than others, and again, I don't mean that in the ideological sense, I mean that liberal in the sense of being more open to,
Absolutely.
you know, I mean, I've had people in policy courses that I've taught that, you know, support Hillary or support Larry or support Bernie or Donald Trump, you know what I mean? I always try to even break the ice, you know, on the first, you know, some of you people think Bernie Sanders is manna from heaven. Some of you hear Donald J. Trump and the first thing that comes to your mind is, you know, he's either the devil incarnate or raise that wall 10 feet higher. You know, so sometimes if you make a little humor out of it, it kind of breaks the ice a little bit. So sometimes I try to do that. But I will tell you that from a principal perspective, don't ever be afraid to say what's on your heart. You know, and as long as you do that in a respectful manner, you know, at the end of the day, you win the race, in my opinion. Yes, sorry.
I have two questions.
Please.
One is like a piggyback on that.
Sure.
You said that if you're having a bad day, you want a student to point out to you that maybe you did something wrong.
Yeah.
I don't feel like most professors think that way. I think most professors think that their word is more important than yours. And also the students in the class, even if they don't think they're smarter than you, they might think they have a moral high ground, especially
Sure.
people like us. Where on the college campus, everyone's like, oh, being a liberal, voting for Hillary, that's morally better than voting for Trump or whatever.
Sure.
I feel the pressure as well. I say absolutely silent in class.
Yeah.
If professors are like, no one's participating, I'm like, well, if I do participate, then you mark me down, which hasn't happened to me. I've gotten marked down, I went to the professor and I'd say, this is exactly what like Annie Scalia would write. And they're like, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, then why'd you mark me down? And they're like, I don't like it. So I do agree that I should just stay quiet and wait till I get out of school. And it's a similar question I asked Larry. And I don't know if you have a different perspective because you're a professor here or.
Yeah, when I was in college, for better and for worse, I didn't keep my mouth shut. I'm a New Yorker through and through. I mean, born and bred. My parents are immigrants. They literally, in different years in the 1960s, they came off a boat from Italy to here. My parents raised me, and for example, my sister and I, right? I mean, we both speak, read, and write Italian fluently. I am not an Italian American. I am an American. That's how I was raised. I am not going to disrespect you, but if you are not giving me that same respect in return, I'm going to let you know. And I won't lie. I mean, when I was in college, both in undergrad and grad, that hit me a few times. It did. You know, and it's kind of, you know, expensive, you know, teaching an intro to econ class, right? I mean, if that isn't the most classic example of, you know, intangible opportunity costs and trade-offs, I don't know what is, right? It's really kind of making that decision for yourself, you know, and what will assist you best. The only counter-argument that I would make, and it's really not a counter-argument, the only extension that I would make to your question is, you gotta remember that you can be quiet in some places, and you can roar in others. Because I guarantee you, there is no hardcore progressive or conservative group on campus that's doing this. And this, brother, in your whole college career, 25 to 30% of what you learn in the classroom is what's actually going to be useful to you. This is the stuff that hits. And when you change heads here, listen, man, the class stuff, you know, forget about it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Because you know something? If it's a situation where it's a progressive faculty member and a conservative student, or a conservative faculty member and a progressive student, and there's not that minimal level playing field to say, make an argument, not Facebook or Kim Kardashian told me so. Make a rational, logical argument for X. If the environment cannot allow for that, If you need to be silent, do it. And if you need to be open and verbal, do that as well. Again, you're intelligent enough to make that decision for yourself. But the only thing that I would say to the both of you that raise those kind of questions, and to all the young people in college is that keep in mind, man, like, this is only 4 years, bro. You got your whole life. And to top it off, you've got the 4 years while you're here. And these 4 years will be in, I still remember most of it till today. If I could do college again, I would do it over in 5 seconds, and I wouldn't change it a minute of it. Some of my friends are still some of my best friends today. I love college. I love it. But you know what? There are so many other things. There are so many other things you can do. There are so many avenues, different organizations, getting out into the public, going to meetings, getting involved in local government, man. You put yourself out there, brother, and you would be incredibly shocked. I remember when I was running in 2015, how many people actually told me, you're the first person in years that's knocked on my door. And I'm like, there's been other people who have held office. What in the world have they been doing for the last umpteen years, right? You know what I mean? It's a lot of work, but you've got friends, you've got sisters, you've got brothers, you've got organizations that will work with you to teach you about the process from an objective perspective. Dude, get yourself out there. And you know what? You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. And that's okay. You take the wins and you move them forward with your pants up. You take the losses and you learn something and translate it, and it makes you even better. I think you have a second question, or?
Yeah, no, I don't want to take up everyone's time.
Yeah, no, sure. I can stay as long as, I don't want to compete in speaker reports, but yeah.
Well, you were talking earlier about how the Constitution is like the greatest document in history, and the separation of power, checks and balances, and I agree with all that, but it seems like in modern times, it's turned like the reverse. You know, judges are giving themselves power that the Constitution didn't give them.
Sure.
The Congress is passing laws that the Constitution didn't say they could. And power is moving from local and state up to the federal branch. So from a libertarian point of view, the government every year gets more and more control over our lives.
Yeah.
I don't know if you see this problem too, or is there a way to restore it back to the way it was?
Yes, there is. And I am going to totally give you a not political answer to answer your question. I'm going to share with all of you because it's probably very fitting with this question. I'm actually going to share with you why I ran for office in 2015. I jokingly tell them, I love both my parents, obviously. I would take a bullet for both. Personally, I am my mother's son. I am a photocopy of my mother. In March of 2015, I was on the phone with my mom when how's work, blah, 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 and, I started yammering, about, well, this is good in Binghamton, and I don't like the way, the road's really crap. And I was going on for like 5 minutes, and my mom, with the accent that she has, she's on the phone with me, and she literally stops me in mid-sentence. And she said, Giovanni, when are the local elections this year? And honest to God, I didn't know the answer. I had to Google it. And I was like, oh, look at that. The city council elections are this year. You know what my mother looked at me and said over the phone? She said, run, win, and make a difference, or shut up. That's what my mother told me. And no joke, the very next day, I asked my friend to be a campaign treasurer, and I went from there. Run, win, brother, and make a difference. That's it. Systems of rules, no matter, if I may, brother.
Yep.
Thank you. No matter how codified they are, right? When I worked in the private sector, my boss was a vice president. He told me this that I'll never forget. Systems run businesses, but people run systems. As codified as this is as fundamental as the people it is bestowed to. you know, there's that old story that I'm sure you've heard, right? Ben Franklin, he walks out, and a woman looks at him and says, "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us?" And his answer was, "A republic, if you can keep it." That's the important line. It's not the republic, it's the if you can keep it. Now, don't get me wrong, in my personal opinion, I like a Republican small r form of government. That's my personal opinion. But if you cannot keep it, brother, if we cannot keep it, if you've ever been to the Library of Congress down in DC and seen that beautiful piece of parchment paper under that glass with that fading ink, if we don't keep it, they're words. They don't mean anything. We keep those words. That's why I always tell people, I hate when people call me counsel. I'm not above you. I am below you. I work for you. It is my job to represent your interests. It doesn't work the other way around. It is our government, and our government only works if we are engaged every minute of every day. It doesn't end at the ballot box. It starts at the ballot box. Brother, it is a never-ending siege from day one. It is my job and your job, if I represent you, to hold my feet to the fire. Because if I screw up, I deserve to be called out on that. And I'm a human. I will. And I want to be called out. I want to be made a better person. So, brother, keep it, run for it, win it, make a change. Were there any other questions? Let's just start.
Take probably one more.
I wanted to keep on next year.
Thanks so much for coming, Joe. We really
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
very much for all your afternoon.
Absolutely.
Forgive me, I twisted my ankle 2 days ago, so I'm walking like a gimp.